Most people think the hardest part is leaving the wrong person. It isn't. The hardest part is living with the version of yourself who stayed. The version who kept explaining what should have been obvious. The version who softened the truth because the truth would have required action. The version who kept saying, maybe this time will be different, while quietly collecting evidence that it would not. And that is why healing after loving the wrong people is not just heartbreak recovery. It is self-recovery. Because when you love the wrong people long enough, you do not only lose time, you lose trust in your own perception. You lose confidence in your own standards. You lose the clean, quiet certainty that used to tell you, this does not feel right. And after it ends, even if you are free on the outside, something inside may still feel attached. Not only to them, to the hope, to the fantasy, to the unfinished conversation, to the version of the story where they finally understand what they did, finally become who you needed, and finally love you in a way that makes all the suffering feel meaningful. But here is the truth most people avoid. Some pain does not become meaningful because the other person changes. It becomes meaningful because you do. Not harder, not colder, not bitter. Clearer. And clarity is the beginning of your return. If you've ever loved someone who made you feel small, anxious, unseen, or ashamed of what you tolerated, this is for you. Not to reopen the wound, but to stop calling the wound love. Because the wrong people do not always arrive looking wrong. Sometimes they arrive as chemistry, as familiarity, as intensity, as rescue, as the answer to a loneliness you did not know was making decisions for you. And that is what makes them so difficult to release. They do not only touch your heart, they touch an unfinished place in you. A place still hoping to be chosen. A place still trying to prove that it can be enough. A place still believing that if you love deeply enough, patiently enough, quietly enough, someone will finally become safe. But healing begins when you stop making your love responsible for someone else's transformation. Let that sentence settle. Your love can support growth. It cannot replace character. Your patience can create space. It cannot create accountability. Your forgiveness can release resentment. It cannot become a substitute for change. And your loyalty, no matter how beautiful, becomes dangerous when it keeps you attached to disrespect. That is where many good people lose themselves. Not because they are weak, but because their strongest qualities were offered to people who did not honor them. Compassion without boundaries becomes self-neglect. Understanding without standards becomes confusion. Forgiveness without evidence becomes permission. Hope without truth becomes a cage. And this is where healing must begin. Not with the question, why did they do this to me? But with the deeper question, what part of me kept trying to make pain feel like love? That question is not meant to blame you. It is meant to return power to you. Because as long as the entire story is about their behavior, your freedom remains tied to their explanation. You wait for their apology, their awareness, their remorse, their confession, their sudden maturity. But the person who made you doubt your reality may never be the person who validates it. And at some point, you must stop asking the source of confusion to become the source of closure. Closure is not always something they give. Sometimes closure is something you create through boundaries, through honesty, through no longer negotiating with the part of you that wants to return to what nearly broke you. That is where everything changes. You stop chasing a final conversation. You start building a final decision. The first step in healing after loving the wrong people is to stop romanticizing what damaged you. This is harder than it sounds because the mind has a strange loyalty to hope. When someone has hurt you, but also given you moments of tenderness, the mind often returns to the tenderness. It replays the good morning messages, the deep conversations, the rare moments when they seemed present, the way they looked at you when things were good, the version of them that made you believe there was something worth saving. And yes, those moments may have been real. But moments are not patterns. A good day does not erase a harmful cycle. A soft voice does not cancel repeated disrespect. A beautiful memory does not become proof that the relationship was healthy. You can honor the good without letting it hide the truth. That is emotional maturity. It means you can say there were moments that mattered and still admit the pattern was hurting me. You can say, I love them, and still say they were not safe for my life. You can say they had pain and still say their pain did not give them the right to keep creating mine. Most people get stuck because they confuse emotional complexity with compatibility. They think if it was complicated, it must have been deep. But not every complicated relationship is deep. Some are simply unstable. Some are built on inconsistent affection, emotional avoidance, unresolved wounds, and the hope that intensity can compensate for the absence of peace. Pain can create attachment. Chaos can create obsession. Uncertainty can create craving. But none of those things are proof of love. They are proof that your nervous system was involved. That is why you can miss someone who was not good for you. That is why you can know the relationship was unhealthy and still feel pulled toward it. That is why you can feel relief when it ends, then grief an hour later, then anger, then longing, then guilt, then clarity, then confusion again. Healing is not a straight line because attachment is not a logical agreement. It lives in the body, in memory, in habit, in the places where fear and desire learn to hold hands. So when you miss them, do not immediately interpret that as a sign you should return. Missing someone is not the same as being meant for them. Longing is not always love. Sometimes longing is the echo of a pattern your body has not finished releasing. That is why you must learn to separate memory from evidence. Memory says they were tender that night. Evidence says they were inconsistent for months. Memory says they said they loved me. Evidence says they did not protect my heart with their actions. Memory says maybe they could have changed. Evidence says I was the one waiting, adapting, shrinking, explaining, and carrying the emotional weight. Evidence will save you when nostalgia tries to rewrite the story. This is not about becoming harsh. It is about becoming accurate, because healing requires accuracy. You cannot heal from a relationship you keep editing into something it was not. You cannot recover from a pattern while still calling it potential. You cannot rebuild self-trust if you keep betraying the evidence to protect the fantasy. At some point, the fantasy must be allowed to die. Not because love was meaningless, but because your peace is more important than preserving a beautiful illusion. And this death is painful. It can feel like grieving two people, the person they were, and the person you kept hoping they would become. The second grief is often harder, because potential has no ending. It can always whisper, maybe one day. Maybe one day they will understand. Maybe one day they will apologize. Maybe one day they will heal. Maybe one day they will return differently. But you cannot build your life around maybe. A life built around maybe becomes a waiting room. And you were not born to spend your best years waiting for someone to become safe. You were born to live in truth, to choose peace without needing permission, to stop mistaking endurance for devotion, to understand that the right love does not require you to abandon your own emotional reality. That is the first return. You return to what happened. Not the edited version, not the hopeful version, not the version that protects them from accountability. The real version, and the real version may be painful, but it is clean. And clean pain heals faster than decorated denial. Now here is where it gets more important. After loving the wrong people, you may not immediately know who you are without the struggle. That can be unsettling. When a relationship has trained you to monitor, wait, explain, forgive, chase, repair, and interpret, your identity begins to organize around survival. You become skilled at reading moods, skilled at minimizing your needs, skilled at choosing words that will not provoke distance, skilled at staying calm when you are actually hurt, skilled at pretending a small improvement is enough because you are afraid to ask for the full respect you deserve. And then, when the relationship ends, the crisis stops. But the survival habits remain. You may still feel the urge to over-explain, still feel guilty for resting, still feel nervous when someone does not respond quickly, still expect affection to disappear, still feel like your needs are too much, still apologize when you have done nothing wrong. This is how the wrong people can remain in your life even after they are gone. They remain as conditioning, as reflex, as the small fear that rises before you speak honestly, as the tension in your body when peace feels unfamiliar, as the suspicion that love will always require performance. And this is why healing has to be more than moving on. Moving on is external. Healing is internal. Moving on says, they are no longer here. Healing says, their pattern no longer lives in me. That is the deeper work. You begin by noticing where you adapted. Not to shame yourself. To recover yourself. Where did you become quieter? Where did you become less honest? Where did you start accepting crumbs and calling them effort? Where did you stop asking for what you needed because you were tired of being disappointed? Where did you begin believing that calm love was unrealistic? Where did you confuse being chosen sometimes with being loved consistently? These questions are not comfortable, but they are necessary. Because every place you adapted is a place you now get to reclaim. If you silenced your needs, healing is learning to name them without apology. If you doubted your intuition, healing is learning to believe the first signal instead of waiting for the 10th wound. If you lowered your standards, healing is raising them without needing to justify them. If you became addicted to their approval, healing is building an identity that does not collapse when someone cannot recognize your worth. This is how self-trust returns, not as a feeling, as a practice. You keep promises to yourself, small ones at first. You do not check. You do not send the message. You do not reopen the door because loneliness arrives. You do not explain your boundary to someone committed to misunderstanding it. You do not call emotional chaos connection because it feels familiar. Every time you choose truth over impulse, you rebuild self-trust. Every time you honor what you know instead of obeying what you miss, you rebuild self-trust. Every time you protect your peace without turning it into a debate, you rebuild self-trust. And over time, you begin to feel something you may not have felt for a long while. Inner steadiness. Not because everything is healed, but because you are no longer betraying yourself in the same old ways. That is a powerful moment. Quiet, but powerful. The kind of moment no one else may notice. But you will know. You will know when you miss them and still do not return. You will know when you feel guilt and still keep the boundary. You will know when you feel lonely and choose dignity over access. You will know when your peace becomes more valuable than being wanted. That is where your life begins to change. The wrong people often train you to measure love by intensity. But healing teaches you to measure love by safety. This difference is everything. Intensity says, I cannot stop thinking about them. Safety says, I can finally think clearly around them. Intensity says, they make me feel high and low. Safety says, they make my nervous system feel settled. Intensity says the connection is powerful. Safety asks, is it kind? Intensity can be exciting. But safety allows love to become a home instead of a battlefield. And if you have been conditioned by unstable relationships, safety may feel strange at first. It may feel too calm, too simple, too available, too honest. You may even mistake it for a lack of chemistry because your body has learned to associate love with tension. This is one of the most important parts of healing. You have to develop a new appetite. An appetite for peace, for consistency, for clear communication, for respect that does not need to be begged for affection that does not disappear as punishment, for people who do not make you earn basic emotional decency. At first, peace may not feel thrilling, but peace is not emptiness. Peace is the absence of threat. And when you have lived too long in emotional threat, peace can feel unfamiliar enough to question. Do not reject what is healthy simply because it does not activate the old wound. Not every calm relationship is boring. Sometimes your body is just learning that love does not have to be a crisis. This is where many people sabotage healing. They leave the wrong people, but still crave the emotional rhythm the wrong people created. The chase, the suspense, the uncertainty, the reconciliation, the apology that feels like relief, the little return after distance, the sudden tenderness after coldness. This cycle can become addictive because the relief feels powerful. But relief is not love. Relief is what you feel when pain temporarily stops. And if someone keeps creating the pain, then offering relief, you may become bonded to the cycle rather than nourished by the relationship. That is the trap. You are not craving the person as much as you are craving the moment the anxiety ends. And once you see that, the spell begins to weaken. You start asking, do I miss them or do I miss the relief? Do I want love or do I want the discomfort to stop? Am I returning because they are right for me or because emptiness feels harder than familiar pain? These questions create distance between you and the impulse. And distance is where wisdom enters. Because the impulse will say, go back. Wisdom will ask, back to what? Back to waiting, back to proving, back to decoding, back to lowering your voice, your expectations, and your standards, back to becoming grateful for moments that should have been normal, back to calling inconsistency complicated instead of unacceptable. No, not this time. Some lessons are too expensive to buy twice. That line is not bitterness. It is protection. You already paid with confusion, with tears, with time, with self-doubt, with the version of yourself who kept hoping longer than your peace could afford. You do not need to pay again. Now here is another layer. Sometimes healing after loving the wrong people is difficult because part of you still wants them to admit it. You want them to understand the damage. You want them to say, I see it now. I should have treated you better. You were not asking for too much. You were right to feel hurt. I lost someone valuable, and that desire is human. When someone has made you question your pain, validation can feel like oxygen. But if you make your healing depend on their admission, you hand them the power to keep you emotionally suspended. You wait. You check. You wonder. You imagine the message. You prepare the speech. You rehearse the moment when they finally become aware. But some people will never give you the apology that matches the wound. Not because the wound was small, because their capacity is. And this is where you must decide. Will you let their lack of accountability become another injury? Or will you learn to validate your own reality? This does not mean the apology would not matter. It means your healing cannot depend on it. You can want an apology and still move without it. You can wish they understood and still stop explaining. You can accept that they may tell the story in a way that protects their ego. And you can still know the truth. There is a quiet strength in no longer needing to be understood by people who benefited from misunderstanding you. That kind of strength feels lonely at first. Then it becomes freedom. Because you stop spending your inner life in a courtroom. You stop collecting arguments. You stop proving your pain to an imaginary judge. You stop living as if your wound becomes real only when they confess. Your pain is already real. Your experience is already valid. Your body remembers what your mind tried to minimize. You do not need their agreement to begin your recovery. This is where closure becomes an act of self-leadership. You close the door because the pattern was harmful. You close the door because your dignity matters. You close the door because peace is not something you keep sacrificing for emotional access. You close the door because even if they explained everything, the explanation would not undo the cost. And that is enough. No dramatic ending required. No final speech. No perfect last message. Just a decision that says, I believe what happened. I believe what I felt. I believe what I learned. That is closure with a backbone, and it is one of the most dignified forms of healing. But there is a painful question many people carry beneath the surface. Why did I choose them? Or even more quietly, why was I chosen by someone like that? This question can become dangerous if it turns into self-attack. Because after loving the wrong people, shame often tries to rewrite the story. It says, you should have known. You were foolish. You were blind. You allowed it. You wasted time. But shame is not wisdom. Shame is pain looking for a place to land. And if you let it land on your identity, you may begin to believe the relationship proves something bad about you. It does not. It proves that something in you was vulnerable to something in them. That is different, and it can be healed. You may have been vulnerable to charm because you were hungry for warmth. You may have been vulnerable to inconsistency because love felt inconsistent earlier in life. You may have been vulnerable to rescuing because being needed made you feel valuable. You may have been vulnerable to potential because you learned to see people as who they could become, not who they repeatedly chose to be. You may have stayed because loneliness felt more frightening than disappointment. You may have stayed because leaving would have forced you to face the grief you were postponing. You may have stayed because you are loyal, because you are hopeful, because you wanted your love to be strong enough to heal what they refused to face. None of this makes you weak. It makes you human. But healing requires you to become an honest human. One who can say, I understand why I stayed, and I am still responsible for learning not to stay there again. That is the balance. Compassion without denial. Responsibility without cruelty. You do not heal by hating the version of you who tolerated too much. You heal by understanding what that version of you was trying to protect, avoid, earn, prove, or repair. Maybe that version of you was trying to avoid abandonment. Maybe trying to earn love. Maybe trying to finally receive from someone emotionally unavailable what you once needed from someone else. Maybe trying to prove that your love could be enough. But love is not a performance that earns safety. Love should not require you to disappear in order to keep it alive. And when you understand that, shame begins to loosen. You stop saying, "How could I be so foolish?" You start saying, "I was trying to meet a need in a place that could not meet it." That is a more accurate sentence. And accuracy heals. Because once you see the need, you can stop outsourcing it to the wrong people. If the need was to feel chosen, you can learn to choose yourself in visible ways. If the need was to feel safe, you can build a life that does not depend on unstable people. If the need was to feel valuable, you can stop measuring your value by the effort someone refuses to make. If the need was to feel loved, you can begin seeking love that does not require you to abandon truth. This is not quick work, but it is sacred work. Because you are not just leaving a person. You are leaving an old agreement. The agreement that your worth depends on being wanted. The agreement that love must be earned by endurance. The agreement that if someone is wounded, you must tolerate the wounds they give you. The agreement that your needs are dangerous. The agreement that leaving is failure. These agreements were not created by one relationship. They were revealed there. And now they must be rewritten. Not in words alone, in behavior. You rewrite them every time you choose the boundary over the craving. Every time you choose evidence over fantasy. Every time you choose peace over emotional theater. Every time you say, I can love someone and still not allow them access to me. That is a new agreement. That is where self-respect becomes embodied. And once self-respect becomes embodied, you stop needing to announce your standards. You simply live them. You leave earlier. You pause sooner. You ask clearer questions. You believe actions faster. You stop mistaking apologies for change. You stop mistaking chemistry for compatibility. You stop giving the deepest parts of yourself to people who only know how to handle surface-level access. And this does not make you less loving. It makes your love more protected, more precise, more dignified. A love without discernment is not pure. It is exposed. And exposed love, placed in careless hands, becomes injury. The goal is not to love less. The goal is to love with wisdom. There is a point in healing where you stop asking, how do I stop feeling? And you begin asking, how do I stop betraying what I know? That question changes everything. Because feelings may rise for a long time. You may still miss them. You may still remember. You may still feel tenderness toward the version of them that once made you feel seen. But healing does not require emotional amnesia. It requires emotional leadership. It requires the ability to say, I feel this, but I do not have to obey it. That is maturity, not the absence of emotion. The ability to carry emotion without letting it make decisions that harm you. Because after loving the wrong people, your heart may still reach backward before your life is ready to move forward. And that is where many people confuse feeling with truth. They think, if I still miss them, maybe I made the wrong choice. If I still think about them, maybe they were the one. If I still feel attached, maybe I should try again. But feelings are not always instructions. Sometimes feelings are residue. Sometimes they are memory. Sometimes they are withdrawal. Sometimes they are the echo of a pattern that has not yet left the body. And this is where wisdom must become stronger than nostalgia. Nostalgia is selective. It edits. It softens. It removes the anxiety from the memory and leaves only the warmth. It takes one good moment and places it under a golden light. It forgets how many nights you felt alone while still attached. It forgets the conversations that went in circles. It forgets the quiet humiliation of asking for the same basic respect again and again. It forgets the way you became smaller. So when nostalgia comes, do not fight it. Question it. Ask, what are you leaving out? Ask, what did this memory cost me? Ask, am I remembering love or am I remembering relief? That question matters. Because relief can disguise itself as love. When someone repeatedly made you anxious and then briefly made you feel secure, the moment of relief may have felt powerful. You may have called it closeness. You may have called it proof. You may have thought, this is why I stay. But a relationship that repeatedly injures you and then comforts you does not become safe because comfort occasionally appears. That is not peace. That is interruption. You deserve more than interruptions in pain. You deserve a pattern of care, not occasional tenderness, not emotional scraps dressed up as depth, not apology without transformation, not affection that disappears when accountability enters the room. A pattern, a stable, visible, repeatable pattern. And once you understand that, the standard becomes simpler. You stop asking, Did they ever love me? You ask, was their love healthy for me? Those are different questions. Someone can love you in the only way they know and still not love you in a way that is safe to live inside. Someone can care and still be careless. Someone can miss you and still not have the maturity to meet you. Someone can want access to you without being willing to honor you. And if you do not understand this, you may keep accepting emotional fragments because you are trying to prove that the love was real. But the goal is not to prove the love was real. The goal is to ask whether it was whole enough to build a life on. That is where your standards become clear. You are not asking for perfection. You are asking for emotional responsibility. You are asking for honesty. You are asking for consistency. You are asking for repair that includes changed behavior. You are asking for a connection where your softness does not become someone else's advantage. That is not too much. That is the minimum foundation of a healthy bond. And if someone makes you feel guilty for needing that foundation, they are not inviting you into love. They are inviting you into self-abandonment. Do not confuse the two. This is where the rebuilding begins. Not with a new relationship, not with a new person, not with the rush of being wanted again, but with the slow return to yourself. You begin asking, what does my peace require? Not, how do I keep them? Not, how do I make them understand? Not, how do I become easier to love? But what does my peace require? This question may feel unfamiliar because for a long time you may have organized your inner life around someone else's emotional weather. If they were distant, you felt anxious. If they were kind, you felt relieved. If they were angry, you felt responsible. If they were uncertain, you became more accommodating. Their mood became your atmosphere. Their attention became your oxygen. Their approval became your evidence. And slowly, you moved out of your own center. Healing is the process of moving back in. That is why solitude becomes important. Not isolation. Solitude. Isolation says, I am alone because I am unwanted. Solitude says, I am alone because I am rebuilding my relationship with myself. There is a difference. In solitude, you begin to hear your own voice again. At first, it may be faint, buried beneath the opinions you absorbed, the criticisms you internalized, the fears you inherited, and the needs you postponed. But if you keep listening, your voice returns. It tells you what you actually feel, what you actually want, what you no longer accept, what you need to protect, what kind of love your life can no longer survive. And when your voice returns, your life begins to reorganize. You stop making decisions from panic. You stop confusing urgency with importance. You stop explaining every boundary until someone approves of it. You stop asking people who benefit from your confusion to define your clarity. That is a turning point. Because the wrong people often make you dependent on their interpretation. They tell you that you are too sensitive, too demanding, too emotional, too difficult, too much. And if you hear that long enough, you may begin to edit yourself before anyone even asks. You reduce your needs. You soften your language. You present your pain gently enough that it does not inconvenience them. You become careful in your own life. But healing returns you to a simple truth. Having needs does not make you difficult. Having standards does not make you cold. Having boundaries does not make you selfish. Having emotional responses to repeated hurt does not make you unstable. You are allowed to respond to what harms you. You are allowed to say, "This does not work for me." You are allowed to leave places where your heart has to beg for basic care. And you do not need to become cruel to do it. You only need to become clear. Clarity is often mistaken for coldness by people who benefited from your confusion. Let them mistake it. You are not responsible for making your growth comfortable for those who preferred you unprotected. This is one of the hardest lessons. Because when you become healthier, some people will call it distance. They will say you changed, and they may be right. You did change. You stopped overfunctioning. You stopped absorbing disrespect and calling it patience. You stopped allowing guilt to make decisions for you. You stopped making yourself emotionally available to people who valued your availability more than your well-being. That kind of change will disturb anyone who was attached to your lack of boundaries. But that disturbance is not your emergency. Let it be information. Let it show you who preferred access over respect. Let it show you who only loved the version of you that could be controlled, delayed, persuaded, or emotionally overdrawn. Because healing will reveal people. Not only the person who hurt you, everyone around the pattern. Some will celebrate your return to yourself. Some will question it. Some will minimize it because your self-respect interrupts their convenience. Pay attention. Your healing is not only about choosing better partners. It is about choosing better rooms, better conversations, better emotional environments, better standards for who gets proximity to your life. Because the wrong people are not always romantic partners. Sometimes they are friends who drain you but never show up for you. Family members who require endless loyalty but offer no emotional safety. Mentors who admire your strength while exploiting your silence. Communities where belonging requires self-erasure. People who enjoy your empathy but do not respect your limits. Healing after loving the wrong people means becoming honest about every place where love, loyalty, duty, or familiarity has been used to keep you small. That is not easy, but it is liberating. Because once you see the pattern across your life, you stop treating each wound as an isolated event. You begin to understand the deeper lesson. Your access is sacred. Your energy is sacred. Your softness is sacred. Your attention is sacred. Not everyone who wants these things deserves them, and not everyone who once had them should continue to have them. This is not arrogance. It is stewardship. You are responsible for the life you keep giving people access to. You are responsible for the emotional climate you keep returning to. You are responsible for the standards you enforce, not only the standards you claim. That distinction matters. Many people have standards in theory, but their wounds negotiate them away in practice. They say they want honesty, then accept secrecy. They say they want respect, then tolerate contempt. They say they want consistency, then attach to unpredictability. They say they want peace, then keep reopening the door to chaos. This is not because they lack intelligence. It is because unresolved pain can be persuasive. A lonely part of you may negotiate with your standards. A fearful part may say, "At least they are still here." A hopeful part may say, "Maybe this is enough." A wounded part may say, I do not know if I will find better. And this is where you must become the adult in your own inner life. You must be kind to those parts, but you must not let them drive. You can say, I understand why you miss them. I understand why you are afraid. I understand why being wanted feels comforting, and still, we are not going back. That is self-leadership, not inner violence, inner protection. Because every healing person has moments when they feel divided. One part knows the truth. Another part wants relief. One part remembers the damage. Another part remembers the tenderness. One part wants peace. Another part wants the familiar person who once felt like home, even if that home was unsafe. Do not shame this division. Witness it. Then choose from your highest self. The highest self is not the loudest feeling. It is the clearest knowing. The feeling may say, I miss them. The knowing says missing them does not make the relationship healthy. The feeling may say, I want to respond. The knowing says, responding will reopen what I am trying to heal. The feeling may say, maybe they changed. The knowing says, change is proven by consistent action over time, not words sent in a lonely moment. The feeling may say, I want closure. The knowing says, I can close what they refuse to complete. That is how you grow. Not by never feeling tempted, but by no longer treating temptation as truth. Now here is a part of healing that deserves more honesty. You may grieve the life you imagined. Not only the person, the future, the home, the conversations, the shared milestones, the version of yourself you thought you would become with them. You may grieve the idea that your love would finally be rewarded, that the hard season would become the beautiful testimony, that all the patience would eventually make sense. And when that imagined future dies, the grief can feel strange because you are mourning something that never fully existed. But unrealized futures can still hurt. The mind can become attached to a story. And when the story collapses, you may feel lost, even if the reality was painful. That is why you must learn to separate grief from regret. Grief says, I lost something I hoped for. Regret says, I should never have hoped. Be careful with regret. It can turn your tenderness into shame. You are allowed to grieve what you hoped for. You are allowed to mourn the future you imagined. You are allowed to feel the sadness of realizing that love alone could not make the relationship healthy. But do not use that grief to punish the part of you that believed. That part of you was not foolish. It was human. It wanted love to win. It wanted the story to become beautiful. It wanted the person to become safe. The problem was not that you had hope. The problem was that hope stayed after truth had already spoken. So now you learn a wiser hope. A hope that does not ignore evidence. A hope that does not require self-abandonment. A hope that can say, I believe in love, but not at the cost of my life force. That is the hope you carry forward. Not naive hope. Not bitter absence of hope. Disciplined hope. Hope with eyes open. Hope with boundaries. Hope with self-respect standing beside it. And from that place, you begin to rebuild. Slowly. You rebuild through your environment. You remove reminders that keep reopening the wound. You create routines that return you to your body. You move. You breathe. You clean your space. You eat like someone worth caring for. You sleep like someone who is no longer waiting for emotional permission. You write what you could not say. You allow trusted people to know the truth. You stop protecting the image of someone who did not protect your heart. Not with public bitterness, with private honesty. Because secrecy can keep pain alive. When you keep minimizing what happened, you may accidentally remain loyal to the version of the story that harmed you. Telling the truth to safe people is part of leaving the spell. Not everyone deserves the full story. But someone safe should know enough that you no longer have to carry it alone. Healing requires witnesses, not crowds. Witnesses. People who can say, "I see what this cost you. I believe you. You are not crazy. You are not too much. You are coming back." The right witness can help restore your confidence in reality. But even then, your deepest witness must become yourself. You must be able to sit with your own experience and say, "I know what happened. I know how it felt. I know what it taught me. I know why I am not returning." That is how the fog lifts, because emotional confusion thrives in minimization. Truth creates structure, and structure gives the heart somewhere to stand. This is why journaling, reflection, and honest self-inquiry matter. Not as aesthetic habits, as tools of recovery. Write the pattern clearly, not just the highlights. Write what happened after the apology. Write how many times the same wound repeated. Write what you felt in your body. Write what you stopped doing because of the relationship. Write what you tolerated that you would never want someone you love to tolerate. Write what you now know. Then read it when nostalgia tries to edit the past. Let your own words become evidence, because the healed version of you will need protection from the lonely version of you, and the lonely version will be persuasive. It will say, "Maybe it was not that bad." It will say, "Maybe I overreacted." It will say, "Maybe I should check." It will say, "Maybe one conversation would help." Your written truth can answer, "It was that bad. I did not overreact. I have already checked enough." One more conversation will not heal what repeated harm created. That is why clarity must be documented before longing arrives. You prepare for the weak moments during the clear moments. That is wisdom. Now, as healing deepens, you will face another challenge. You may begin to wonder who you are if you are no longer the person who overgives. This can feel like an identity crisis, because sometimes being the understanding one becomes a role. The forgiving one, the strong one, the loyal one, the one who can handle difficult people, the one who stays, the one who sees the good in everyone, the one who does not give up. And perhaps people praised you for that. Perhaps they depended on it. Perhaps you felt valuable because of it. But a role can become a prison when it does not allow you to be protected. You are allowed to be loving without being endlessly available. You are allowed to be compassionate without becoming absorbent. You are allowed to be loyal without remaining attached to harm. You are allowed to be strong and still say, "This is too heavy for me." That sentence may feel unfamiliar, but it is necessary. Strength is not the ability to endure everything. Sometimes strength is the ability to stop enduring what should not be normalized. There is strength in staying. Yes, But there is also strength in leaving. Strength in refusing to keep explaining your humanity. Strength in losing the relationship but keeping yourself. Strength in disappointing people who expected your silence. Strength in letting the old identity die. Because the person you are becoming cannot be built entirely from the person you were in survival. The survival self was necessary. Honor that self, but do not let that self lead forever. The survival self asks, how do I avoid being abandoned? The healed self asks, how do I avoid abandoning myself? The survival self asks, how do I keep them close? The healed self asks, do they deserve closeness? The survival self asks, how do I become easier for them? The healed self asks, can I be fully myself here? The survival self asks, what if I lose them? The healed self asks, what will I lose if I keep betraying myself? That is the identity shift. Reactive to aware. Overwhelmed to in control. Attached to discerning. Hungry for approval to anchored in worth. And when this shift begins, you stop chasing emotional safety from people who do not carry it. You begin creating it through your own choices. This does not mean you become self-sufficient in a cold way. Human beings need connection. But the quality of your connections changes when your relationship with yourself changes. You no longer enter relationships asking, will you prove I am worthy? You enter asking, can we meet each other with honesty, care, responsibility, and respect? You no longer see love as a rescue. You see it as a meeting. Two people, both responsible for themselves, choosing to build something that does not require either person to disappear. That is a healthier vision. And it may feel less dramatic than what you once called love. But it is more livable, more peaceful, more sustainable. The wrong people often leave you exhausted because you were trying to create a relationship by yourself. You carried the communication, the emotional repair, the hope, the excuses, the patience, the self-reflection, the accountability. You were not in a partnership. You were in a one-person construction project. And love cannot be built by one person carrying materials for two. That is why healing also means learning reciprocity. Real reciprocity. Not equal in every small moment, but mutual in spirit. Mutual care. Mutual effort. Mutual repair. Mutual respect. Mutual willingness to grow. You stop being impressed by people who only receive your love. You begin looking for people who know how to return it with integrity. This applies to romance, but also to friendship, family, work, community, anywhere your energy goes. Ask yourself, is there reciprocity here? Do I leave this connection feeling more grounded or more drained? Can I be honest here without being punished? Does this person benefit from my growth or resist it? Do they respect my no as much as they enjoy my yes? The answer will tell you what kind of access they should have. Not everyone needs to be removed, but many people need to be repositioned. Some belong close. Some belong at a distance. Some belong only in memory. Some belong nowhere near the life you are building. That is not cruelty. That is order. And order is healing. When you have spent time in emotional chaos, order feels like oxygen. You begin to put things where they belong. Your past belongs behind you. not inside every decision. Your pain belongs in your wisdom, not your identity. Your compassion belongs in your heart, not in the hands of people who misuse it. Your energy belongs where it is respected. Your love belongs where it can breathe. Your future belongs to the version of you who finally stopped negotiating with what already hurt enough. This is how your life becomes clean again. Not perfect, clean. A clean life is not a life without grief. It is a life without constant self-betrayal. A life where your choices align more closely with your knowing. A life where your yes is honest. Your no is respected. Your silence is not fear. Your peace is not accidental. Your relationships do not require you to keep abandoning yourself in order to maintain them. And when you begin living this way, you may notice something beautiful. You become less desperate to be chosen. Because you have chosen yourself in a way that is no longer theoretical, you have chosen yourself in the moment that mattered. When the message came. When the loneliness came. When the apology came without change. When the memory came dressed as destiny. When the old hunger asked for another chance. You chose yourself. And every time you do, your identity strengthens. You begin to feel like someone who can be trusted. By you, that is the deepest repair. Because the greatest injury after loving the wrong people is not only that they betrayed you, it is that you may have learned to betray yourself in order to keep them. So the greatest healing is learning to become loyal to yourself again. Loyal when it costs you access. Loyal when it disappoints someone. Loyal when it means grieving what you wanted. Loyal when it means saying no to the familiar. Loyal when it means choosing a quiet night alone over a chaotic night attached. This loyalty is not selfish. It is sacred. It is the root of every future healthy love. Because you cannot build a safe relationship while being unsafe with yourself. You cannot ask someone else to honor your boundaries while you keep abandoning them. You cannot receive peace while still romanticizing chaos. You cannot enter the next chapter carrying the belief that love is something you must earn by tolerating pain. That belief must end here, not someday. Here. Love is not proven by how much you can endure. Love is proven by the quality of care, honesty, safety, and respect that both people bring to the connection. Endurance may be part of life, but endurance is not the foundation of intimacy. If the relationship only survives because you keep absorbing the damage, it is not love carrying the relationship. It is your self-abandonment. That is a hard truth. But it is a freeing one. Because once you see it, you can stop participating in your own disappearance. You can stop calling silence maturity when it is actually fear. You can stop calling overgiving kindness when it is actually self-neglect. You can stop calling endless patience love when it is actually postponed grief. You can stop calling emotional crumbs evidence when your soul is starving. And you can begin again with a different kind of love. First toward yourself, then toward others. A love with a spine, a love with eyes. A love that does not confuse someone's wounds with permission. A love that can say, I understand your pain, but I will not become the place where it keeps injuring me. A love that can say, I care about you, but I care about my peace too. A love that can say, I forgive what I am ready to forgive, but forgiveness does not mean access. That last sentence may save you. Forgiveness does not mean access. You can release bitterness and still keep the boundary. You can wish someone well and still never return. You can stop hating them and still not trust them. You can have compassion without reopening the door. Because forgiveness is about the state of your heart. Access is about the standard of your life. Do not confuse them. Many people use forgiveness to pressure themselves back into unsafe places. They think if they are healed, they should be able to reconnect. But sometimes healing means you are finally clear enough not to reconnect. Sometimes peace is the proof, not reunion, not reconciliation, not one more conversation. Peace. And if peace came after distance, pay attention. Your body may be telling you the truth your heart was afraid to accept. As you move forward, do not rush to become the new you in a performative way. You do not need to turn healing into an identity costume. You do not need to prove that you are powerful by acting untouched. You do not need to display your transformation before you have lived it privately. Let healing be deep before it becomes visible. Let it change your choices before it changes your image. Let it make you more honest, not merely more impressive. Because real healing is often quiet. It looks like deleting the draft message, sleeping through the night, eating a real meal, going one day without checking, saying the truth in therapy, crying without calling it weakness, laughing and realizing it was not forced, noticing beauty again, making a plan that does not include them, feeling the urge to return and letting it pass through you like weather. These moments may not look dramatic, but they are evidence. Evidence that your life is coming back. Evidence that the center is returning to you. Evidence that the wrong people are losing emotional authority. And eventually, you will not need to fight the memory as much. It will still be part of the story, but it will no longer be the room you live in. You will remember without becoming undone. You will feel sadness without making it a command. You will see the lesson without reopening the wound. You will recognize the pattern earlier in others. You will leave more cleanly. You will choose more wisely. You will love more peacefully. And one day, someone's inconsistency will no longer feel like an invitation. It will feel like information. Someone's charm will not make you ignore your discomfort. Someone's potential will not make you abandon their present behavior. Someone's need for you will not trick you into believing they can love you. Someone's apology will not impress you unless their actions become different. This is how you know healing is working. Your standards become faster than your attachment. Your intuition becomes louder than your loneliness. Your peace becomes more convincing than their promise. That is growth, not perfection. Growth. You may still make mistakes. You may still have tender places. You may still be learning. But you will no longer be as easy to pull away from yourself. And that is a profound victory. Because the world is full of people who know how to recognize an open heart. But not everyone knows how to honor one. Your task is not to close your heart. Your task is to protect its entrance. To stop letting temporary intensity bypass long-term evidence. To stop letting someone's pain become more important than your safety. To stop offering permanent access to people who only provide temporary warmth. To stop trusting words that are not supported by patterns. To stop making love the place where your self-respect goes to die. That part of your life is over. Not because you hate anyone, because you have finally returned to yourself. And when you return to yourself, the wrong people lose their power to define you. They become teachers you did not ask for, mirrors you did not want, lessons you would not repeat. But they are not your destiny. They are not the final statement on your worth. They are not proof that love always hurts. They are not the reason you must live guarded forever. They are the reason you now love with wisdom, the reason you now listen sooner. The reason you now choose peace before attachment becomes a prison. The reason you now understand that being wanted is not the same as being valued. That is a different life. And it begins with the most difficult and liberating sentence. I can love someone and still choose myself. Say it until your body believes it. I can miss someone and still not return. I can forgive someone and still keep distance. I can understand someone and still not excuse them. I can grieve what I hoped for and still honor what was true. I can be soft and still be done. That is not contradiction. That is wholeness. You are allowed to be a full human being. Not a performance of strength. Not a monument to pain. Not a caretaker for everyone else's wounds. Not a negotiator for your own worth. A full human being. Tender and discerning. Open and protected. Hopeful and honest. Loving and self-led. And perhaps the most healing truth is this. The love you gave was not wasted just because it was given to the wrong people. It showed you your depth, your capacity, your devotion, your willingness to see beauty, your ability to hope. Those parts are not the problem. They simply need wiser placement. The goal is not to destroy the part of you that loves deeply. The goal is to place that love where it can be honored, because your love is powerful. But it was never meant to be used as evidence in a case for your worth. It was never meant to be spent convincing someone to value you. It was never meant to become the medicine for people who refuse to heal themselves. Your love is not the problem. Your access was. Your standards were. Your tolerance was. Your willingness to keep hoping after the pattern had already spoken was. And these things can change. That is the good news. You can learn. You can refine. You can become wiser without becoming bitter. You can carry the lesson without carrying the wound as your identity. You can let the wrong people become part of your past without letting them become the atmosphere of your future. You can become someone who remembers what happened and still believes life has not finished being kind to you. Because it hasn't. There are still rooms where you will not have to shrink. There are still people whose care will not require confusion. There are still conversations where honesty will not be punished. There are still places where your softness will be safe. There is still a future where love feels like peace, not performance. And when that future comes, you will meet it differently. Not as someone desperate to be chosen, but as someone already chosen by themselves. That is the foundation. From there, you will not accept what you used to accept. You will not confuse a spark with a sanctuary. You will not confuse attention with devotion. You will not confuse pursuit with presence. You will not confuse the fear of being alone with evidence that someone belongs in your life. You will know better. And because you know better, you will choose better. Not perfectly, but sooner, cleaner, with less apology, with more trust in your own knowing. That is how healing changes your future. It does not erase your past. It changes who is allowed to repeat it. There comes a moment when healing becomes quiet. No announcement, no dramatic turning point, no need to convince anyone that you have moved on. You simply stop organizing your life around the people who hurt you. You stop giving your best energy to the memory of what almost became love. You stop waiting for someone to become gentle before you become loyal to yourself. And slowly, almost silently, you become someone new. Someone who does not mistake suffering for depth. Someone who does not confuse longing with destiny. Someone who can love without disappearing. Someone who can care without surrendering the center of their life. Someone who can feel the pull of the past and still walk toward peace. This is the real healing. Not forgetting. Remembering with power. Not hardening. Softening with wisdom. Not becoming untouchable. Becoming unavailable for what dishonors you. You loved the wrong people, but that does not make your love wrong. It means your love was placed where it could not be protected. Now you are learning to protect it. To protect your peace, your future, your dignity, your attention, your becoming. And one day you will look back without needing the story to be different. You will understand that the wrong people were never the final chapter. They were the turning point, the painful doorway, the lesson that brought you back to the self you were abandoning. And this time, you do not leave yourself again.